when Luisa asked me to come here and do a speech, and I said, what do you want me to talk about? He said, can you talk about your métier, your job? I'm like, oh, okay, damn, what can I say about my job? So, yeah, maybe, and thank you for telling that I'm a startup expert, but I do research on trends. I work with a lot of big corporations to actually tell them why you guys are going to destroy them in a few years, basically. And I feel actually 2013 is the first year that is going to change a lot of what we've been building in the past 4 years. So these two words, we can see them all the time, innovation and disruption. Everybody talks about innovation and disruption, and we don't know what it is. It's very hard to give a definition to these two terms. I'm not going to go there, but my job is basically to try to understand how innovation is born and how disruption happens. This is why I work with big companies. This is also why I work with a lot of startups. In 1994, I had my first access on the internet, and honestly, I didn't see it. I didn't see that this will become what it is today. For me, it was just like, hey, cool, I can go to the internet. I think one of the first websites I ever visited besides Apple was maybe ironmaiden.com or something, and it was like, this was really what I just wanted to do. And I started building websites, and it was just a way to make pay college for me. And then in 1999, I had a startup, and I didn't see it back then. I was doing mobile content delivery. How crazy was I to do mobile content delivery? No one had a mobile phone that was able to access the internet, but we were doing that. Of course, we failed, right? 2008, I moved to Japan, and I started to see it. I started to see that there's something going on. I started to understand, because I was working in corporations in between those two dates, and I started seeing that some of the trends I'm going to speak about were kind of nascent. But still, I didn't really believe it. And 2013 for me is the tipping point. It's the year that all this is actually coming together and actually changing. This is what I'm going to tell you. So what drives humans? All of us are driven basically by two things, hope and fear. We're afraid of change, but we hope for a better future. And companies actually have exactly the same things, just that they do that at a very slower pace, because companies are just run by us, humans. So they just act more slowly than us. Startups, because they're smaller, just go a little bit faster, but they're not that different. And innovation and disruption is actually then created by hope and fear. But the big thing is that they're augmented by mass networks. This is one of the biggest things that we've seen in the past 5 years. The biggest trend is coming together. It enhances velocity and reach. You can talk to everyone around the earth, and you can reach people that you were not being able to reach before. I mean, you of course all know that because you're VCs, or at least I hope so. Disruption is a deflation game. So deflation is falling prices. So the whole thing, disruption basically, that's Christensen that said that. Disruption is many things, but for me the most important thing is that you make the price of something fall a lot. This is why I put this image of a fall, by the way, behind it. It's you play with falling prices. These all startups are doing. And incumbents, the big companies that I'm actually working with, these big companies are addicted to large margins. They play on a margins game. So they make a lot of money being a middleman and getting a lot of money on the margins. And you guys, when you're a startup, what you do is actually you play with very, very little margins. And these big corporations are not able to adapt to that reality, dramatically lowering prices. So the best example is, of course, YouTube versus television. So YouTube, of course, is free. It's free also to create your content and put it in there. Well, television is not. And all the television executives you're going to hear, if you know any, will say, yeah, but YouTube is crap. They'll say YouTube is crap. It's bullshit. It's just like cats and people doing crazy shit. And while on TV you have like amazing shows, but still, people are going on YouTube much more than television nowadays. Because actually, what YouTube has done is that dramatically lowered the price of access of production. This is exactly what startups are doing. This is one of the best examples, but there are many others. Dramatically lowering prices at mass scale. The mass scale, and I will keep repeating that word, is what made this possible. Is because before, when I was doing a startup in the 90s, we didn't have that mass scale. We were doing startup the same way, of course it was more expensive, but the same way you guys are doing it now, and you guys here at the program, you are doing that. But the only thing we didn't have access to is mass scale. Well, now you have. So that's the first driver for the tipping point. The mass scale of social networks is something that's been building in the past 5 years, even more, but I would say the 5 years is a good historical perspective. Then it's how many people are online. So you can see this graph, and I'm sorry for the guys behind, but basically, when I was doing a startup here, there was like less than 4 million people that were online. And now we're reaching almost we're reaching above 2 billion in a forecast that by 2020 it will be 5 billion. And let me remember, we're like 7 billion people on the planet. 1/3 of the world has already access to the internet nowadays. 1/3 of the world. So it means, again, the mass is something unprecedented that none of these corporations can actually reach. So this is the biggest opportunity for startups nowadays. Facebook, of course, you know, has more than 1 billion users. But the other example that I really love, because this is, again, and I keep repeating that one, is YouTube has actually more than 1 billion uniques a month. There's more than 1 billion people go to YouTube every month to watch a video or videos. It's massive. And you still have some TV executives, as I said before, they say, it's crap. It doesn't matter. It's not important. You have 1 billion people going every month to see a video on YouTube, and it's TV executives think it's not a big deal. And they don't want to go there. I mean, they try, some of them, but look, this is what they're not getting. Again, fear and hope. This is fear, and they don't want to change. Globalization, this is the other trend. When I was doing, again, a startup in '99, most of the people that had access to the internet were in Western countries, basically US and Europe a bit, and that was pretty much it, right? Nowadays, if you look at this number that I took from Comscore, and I just took the four big Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Yahoo, you can see that the lighter part of the chart is actually the access that are done outside the US. So basically, all the accesses are made outside the US now. They're not made in the US anymore. So the companies are looking for internationalization. And if you love movies, it's the same thing. Now, when Hollywood were releasing movies, they were thinking of a US market. Now when Iron Man is being released in the world, outside the US first, because actually this part of the world is where they make more money than inside the US. It's exactly the same trend we're seeing here, but these numbers are massive. And I didn't put it there, but the estimates will make the US actually tiny. When you think about China, or India, or Brazil, or Russia, the US will be a little dwarf in that world. So that's the second tipping point, the mass globalization of social networks, and the globalization, the fact that everybody has access to it. And of course, I didn't put in there, but there's also networks that you might never have heard about, like Tencent in China. Tencent is only in China, has 800 million users. So it's almost as big as Facebook. Then I just put hashtag here because everybody talked 2 years ago about this revolution that happened in the Middle East, this Arab Spring, right? And all the others, like we're seeing now something happening in Turkey, which is maybe not a revolution, but basically there's movements going on. Movements that seems to be springing from nowhere, sprouting for God knows where. And these, again, are allowed and made possible by these networks. And I put the hashtag because, of course, Twitter is probably the one that is most important in that respect. So basically, these networks have enabled these communities to get together. That was not possible before. Now communities can reach beyond borders, beyond your small village, your country, beyond your continent. And we can learn about things. And they also, this is very important, they enable trust. For 5 years, and again I put 5 years, we can say it's more, we've been using Facebook. Who has Facebook here? I think Facebook is pretty big, right? You use Facebook every day, pretty much everyone, right? You start learning about how to communicate with other people and trust that the fact that even, I remember the first maybe 2-3 years of Facebook, everybody was telling me, oh, but I don't want to friend someone. He's not a friend, right? Friend is just semantics. At the end of the day, what it allowed you is actually to communicate with other people and start having trust, even if you've never seen someone. There's Ivan over there that I had never met before, like 6 months ago. He used to do this fantastic software called Blogo, software to write on WordPress. I've never met him, but still, I knew about him. It was possible for me to communicate with him. And I had never been to Brazil. That's not true, I'd been once. But never been to Brazil. This is exactly what you can do, and that was not possible before. Another thing that big corporations have a hard time understanding, and again, I work with these corporations, and I can tell you they don't see it. They see it, but they don't want to see it because it's, again, fear. Networks enable, of course, transparency, and this is, I know it's a bit idealistic, but the fact that everything is open makes people we trust, and also we become more transparent in what we do. I mean, of course, that also involves people putting pictures about their cats or their food every day, but we're becoming more and more transparent. And that transparency enables trust, and trust enables transparency. That's a virtuous cycle. And networks are being basically utilities. If you think about it now, if any startups comes to me and say, I want to be the next Facebook, I want to look at them and say, yeah, well, maybe, but whatever. At the end of the day, especially Facebook, but Twitter certainly will be, they are utilities. It's like gas, water. It's a utility. You don't even think about it anymore. You just go there. I mean, maybe the means of accessing will change. That you went from a PC to a mobile, and maybe tomorrow you'll have Google Glass or whatever you'll have. But you still, these networks will be around there, will be part of our lives, and this is a given deal. I'm not saying that Facebook will survive. Maybe Facebook will die in 5 years. That's not the issue. But social networks and social networking, even if it evolve, is here to stay. So that's the third driver, the maturity of these networks. It's been 5 years. At the beginning, we're like playing with it, fiddling with it. Now it's almost natural, and for everybody around the world. Of course, I know some countries do not have full access to the internet. I'm not even thinking about China. I'm mostly thinking of Iran, I'm in Burma, I'm in these countries. But still, it's coming. This is a trend. This is the way it's going. And then, of course, this is the biggest one, and this is why I like working with Papaya. This is the mobile growth, and have you all maybe pretty much seen this graph? This is the sales of PCs versus the sales of smartphones and tablets. As you can see, the growth is completely insane. Again, I was doing a startup thinking about mobile here, right? I mean, this is only smartphones. It doesn't comprise mobile. But look at the trend. It's been flat basically for the past 12 years, 13 years, while mobile has been exploding and continues to explode. And everybody has a mobile. Everybody has a mobile. Everybody has a mobile. I keep seeing that. I've been to all the countries you can imagine, and everybody has a mobile. This is the mobile says. I want to show you this for another statistics will come in a minute. You can see the growth, the expected growth in 2017. That's Ben Evans, is an analyst based in the UK. If you love mobile stuff, you should follow him because he actually puts the best estimates out there. And as you can see, the smartphone, the growth of smartphone will be the biggest one. This is population, mobile, smartphone, PC. As you can see, PC won't even grow. I will even say that it will actually decrease, and tablets will grow. Why do I say that? If you look at this growth, it means that by 2017, 71% of the literate population of the planet, so the people who can read and write, will have a smartphone. Again, something that companies cannot really imagine. If you imagine a world where everybody has access to information and networks, and mass networks, so reach, velocity, and scale, in their pocket, always on. I know always on is still not there, but come on. I mean, I travel in other countries and I pretty much have network everywhere. Okay, roaming charges are a bit expensive, but they're actually driving down. 71%. All the trends I've been telling you comes to that. Everybody will have the ability to access these networks and communicate with each other. And why not actually create startups? This is actually a platform shift. These, and I'm not going to go through this, but this is basically in the 60s with our mainframe computers. And then we went from here, basically PCs, the web. This is mobile. This is how many mobile phones are connected to the internet, activated. This is look at this number. Look at the growth here. We're seeing something that we've never seen before, and this is the unprecedented. This is the driver number 4, the explosion of mobile, the explosion of access that has never happened in history of technology in the history of our world. Then something a little bit less technological is I call that jobs fail. Is that we've been through crises, right? I mean, 2008 was pretty intense. I know that emerging countries, because I work a lot with emerging countries, have different cycles. But still, we've seen this massive crisis that created, as all crises in employment, also underemployment, which is slightly different. Many people have lost their jobs. And you know what? The biggest difference between all the crises that happened before and the crisis that happened in 2008 is that we might have reached GDP level. So we might have actually, if you look at just GDP levels, we might have actually gone back to what it was, or even better, but not for jobs. Jobs lost are not recovered as fast as it used to. I know it's less the case again for emerging countries. In Brazil, you're pretty lucky to that. I'm going to come to a number in a minute. But this is something also very, very, very different that is changing. It is not going to change because of automation, because I know some people laugh when I say that, but because of robots, because of all these, we don't need as much workforce. I mean, corporations don't need as much workforce as they used to. So when they actually rebound, they don't need actually to rehire a lot of the people that actually lost their jobs. So what it means that a lot of people are not busy anymore. And they can, and that's the opportunity, they can do something else with it, with their time. This is the numbers of youth unemployment. As you can see, I'm from Greek descent. My father is Greece. 55% of people under 24 don't have a job. And I'm not even talking about underemployment, just unemployed. Spain, 53%. The EU average is about 23. I looked for the number for Brazil. You're below. You're actually even below OECD average. So again, emerging markets have a different dynamic. But still, these are numbers of people that don't have a job and that might never find one if they go through the normal route. And this is something also very new. It used to be 40 years ago that you would basically do whatever. You didn't have to go through university. You would find a job without any problem. That doesn't happen anymore. The emerging market advantage, and I'm mentioning that, of course, because I'm here in Brazil, is first, your economies were built around this lack of resources. It used to be the world was Western countries had access to resources and non-Western countries had not access to resources. So the mindset of emerging countries, a country like Brazil, is built around this lack of resources. And this is also something I see in the startups when I meet them here, is that their mindset is slightly different from what I'm seeing in countries where it's plentiful of resources, like, of course, the US. You have to work with other types of resources, other types of access to markets, access to people, access to money, which means that you're, for me, and this is why I have a high interest in emerging markets. I work a lot also with Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. It's because you have a mindset that allows you, I think, to be in the long run better than us, Westerners, if I can say it like this. Second thing, and I don't want you to take it the bad way, you're also providers of global workforce. When I say I don't want you to say it the bad way, because I said that once in the Philippines where I used to live and people were like, yeah, we're just people to be outsourced. That's not what I'm trying to say. Of course, outsourcing is part of it, but because I live in the Philippines. Outsourcing is part of it, but also because of these networks, you can, again, if I take the example of Ivan, you can actually stay here and do your work and do your software here. You don't have to live in San Francisco. You don't have to live in London where I am. You don't have to live in wherever. You don't have to. You can actually now do it from where you are. And this is a huge force for, especially again, because emerging markets have that mentality built by design into their workforce. So that's the driver number 5, the new rule of global workforce economics. And then the old gatekeepers. I kept repeating about them, and there's many. I just mentioned a few here, but the corporations are obviously the most obvious, but governments are as well. Because governments, what they do, they control competition. What I mean they control competition is not because I'm not saying they want to do bad, but they have a lot of lobbyists. My previous job before I was doing consulting for startups and companies, I was a lobbyist myself. If you've seen the movie Thank You for Smoking, that was me. I was doing that. In Europe, in Brussels. I was actually protecting companies like cigarette makers. Yes, and I smoke. I know how it works. I've seen it firsthand. You lobby, and unions are the same thing, I put it in the end. You lobby for your workers or you lobby for your companies. You try to alter the course of a legislation, alter the course of competition because you want to protect. And of course, that's the heart wants to protect, want to protect our own. But basically, this stifles competition. Universities, in a way, are also doing that, because universities, if you think about it, universities also are the limiting factor to careers. If you go do an MBA in Harvard, you supposedly have a better shot of doing a better career than if you go to a non-Ivy League university, or if you go to an emerging country university. And there's this cascading of things that basically made it that some universities, some educational systems have a better shot, and we're telling you, if you come to us, if you pay us the money, you'll go through. Well, these are the old gatekeepers. Corporations, of course, as well. And I could put like banks are also some kind of, but I don't want to go there now. So basically, all this is protectionism, and it's unsustainable. And we're seeing that because of the cracks that happened because of that last crisis. People cannot find their jobs anymore, so they don't believe in the system anymore. So this is really unsustainable. Again, I know the dynamics is slightly different in a country like Brazil. So the old gatekeepers cannot provide for the people anymore. They cannot just promise that everything's going to be great and everybody's going to have a job. This is gone. I mean, they still try, and I'm not saying that they're not doing good by trying, but for me, it's impossible to actually succeed at that anymore. And now that we have these networks, we know that because we speak to each other, because we actually see what's going on elsewhere. We're not North Korea. Where in North Korea, you still ask people, I've never been there, but we ask people, what do you think about the US? And actually, they all say that the US is actually starving. They don't have enough food because that's the only information they have. We're the complete opposite. We exactly know what's going on everywhere. Not exactly, but we have a pretty good idea of what's going on. So the top-down organization can keep up. We can see it. So that's the driver number 6, inadequacy of top-down organization. I'm not saying that all of them are inadequate. and then they will die. It's not exactly the same thing. I'm not saying there's not a place for corporations or government or unions. I'm just saying that these models are not the only model that actually can, and they will actually be displaced by force that come from the bottom. So with all this, with those 6 drivers, what happens? What do we do with that? It's great to say, I'm pontificating here about that, but what's the next step with that? So what I think is that, first of all, and I said it already, we learned how to trust with social networks. We learn how to trust people that we don't know. We learn how to trust like strangers, foreigners, people from other countries without actually having to meet them anymore. And that changes the dynamic of the economy. And then we also learn about transparency and learn about openness. It's still not there. Again, I'm not an idealist. I'm not saying that it's fully there, but I think 2013 is a year that this is coming to change. I mean, if you've seen what happened in the US with PRISM last week when we learned that the American government was spying on every single piece of communication that was done by US citizens, what you actually see is not the fact that they were doing that, is that this information got out and got spread very, very, very quickly, and which also changed actually the dynamic between US and China, because now China says, oh yeah, you were telling us that we were the bad guys and you are the bad guys. So this is changing a lot of the dynamics that are that are far bigger than just a story and a headline of the New York Times. So this is what the whole crux. We're using now this trust, these networks, to provide for ourselves. If corporations, if government, if unions cannot provide for us, we have to do it ourselves at our own level. And this is some trends that I'm going through that we have seen it. So the internet, for me, who knows what the agora? Agora is a term in Greek that basically says it's a bit of a marketplace, an exchange of ideas is what I use that. If you want to use marketplace, it's good. I think it's the only reason I like agora is it's a bit more than a marketplace. It's also ideas, people just meeting each other. So the internet is a global and free agora, free marketplace. To a certain extent, again, I agree that there are some hicks there and there, but I mean, basically, that's it. And it liberates a new supply of ideas, people, and goods and services. This is exactly what we're seeing right now, and you've seen many, many examples. I mean, many people think only about Facebook and just meeting each other, but I'm going to run through examples of companies that do more than that. So, of course, the communities, Twitter, Facebook, DeviantArt, I put these, but there could be many others. It's just people who meet each other. DeviantArt is a little bit more, but you can actually even sell your art, but basically it's just meeting. This was the first stage of these communities. Now, if you go further, you have the global human capital. Has anyone heard about Odesk or Elance? So basically, these are companies that provide, I can say, like, I do a weekly show about digital. And instead of actually doing everything myself, or instead of hiring someone who lives in my city because maybe the price is too high, I just go there and I put a request. I say, I need a guy who does video production, and I need another guy who does transcripts of my videos, and I need another guy who does design for my website. And actually, I get answers, and I've got now one guy in Beijing, one guy in Southeast Asia, and one guy in North America doing that for me. And these are networks that liberates these forces, because I don't even need not to look for these. I actually have platforms that allow me to do it. Elance is basically the same thing. There's many others. There's Rev. There's many others. So these are, and now you have also these P2P marketplaces. Of course, you know Airbnb. The big thing with Airbnb is not that it's a marketplace. The big thing with Airbnb is like you guys. Like I have something, it's my own, but I can use it to generate more revenue. So if I have a house, I have an extra room, I can say, oh, I want to put extra revenue on that room that I have, or my house if I'm traveling, and I'm traveling a lot. Lyft. It's a company in the US. It's for cars. The same thing. There's two models. Either you want to do car sharing. I'm going from point A to point B. Who wants to come with me? Get paid for that. Or I don't need it, because actually I think the number is 90% of the time of your car is spent parked in front of your house. You only use it 10%, 8 to 10%, depending on the countries, of course. It's an average. But basically, you can liberate the 90% and actually say, oh, do you want to use my car? You pay me. I don't need to go to Hertz or Avis. I actually directly go through such a website and actually get money. But the important part is not, it's the model behind it, it's the idea. I have something and I use it to generate more revenue. This changes a lot because it also changes how companies will think about their product and services, because if this mindset that is growing is there, and it is, the products that I will choose to buy, I will think also, okay, I buy this, but I want to be able to buy something that will also let me generate more revenue. And I will not buy the rest, because the rest I just have access. I don't need to buy a car, I can use yours. And you don't maybe need to actually, I don't know, you don't need to live anywhere, and you can only just like rent my space from Airbnb. And I put other lending club, for instance. Lending club is the same thing for financial lending. I mean, you need access to fast cash instead of to go to a financial institution. I'm like, hey, Daniel, can you lend me some money? And there's a platform, and you get some money, you get some interest there. AngelList, and you all know AngelList, is basically the same idea. Instead of going for, sorry, because I have two things behind me there that dropped my pants. That's a low-rise pants, right? Instead of actually looking for deal flow through serendipity or events, I just go on AngelList and I have actually a full deal flow. There's F6S as well that does the same idea, but basically it's the idea of we don't need middlemen anymore. Even though these companies are somewhat a middleman, we don't need middlemans anymore. I can have access directly to IDs, capital, products, service. Access. Access is more important than ownership. And Udemy, same idea for, I don't know if you know Udemy, same idea for education. Basically, I can put a course there and I'm going to be paid for whoever wants to take the course. It's completely, any one of you can put a course there about whatever you want, you just put it there, then, and if I suddenly stumble upon your course because it's interesting for me, I'll just pay you. I know a friend of mine, he put like 50 hours of video, and in less than 1 month, he already earned more than $25,000. So it's connected human capital, as I said. I like that, stay local, work global, this is what I said before. People say glocal, I don't know if it's a very nice word, but basically you don't need to travel anymore to find a new, this is something very, very important for emerging markets. Again, for instance, I was living in the Philippines. Philippines know that they send a lot of their workforce, I think more than 25% of the population lives abroad because they work in ships, they work in service industry. They don't need to do that anymore. Of course they still do, but I mean, the mindset is not, oh, I need to migrate to find a job. You can do it where you live. It's also a lifestyle choice. And this is where I'm going there, the new self, new people, the new identities. Of course, it's more with the youth, and I do a lot of research about youth than it is with older generation, but that's not completely true because it changes very fast. Basically, now, I don't know if any of you was a geek when he was a kid, or was offbeat, liked the sports that nobody else in this class loved. Before that, either you were bullied, you were hiding that, or you were just not talking about it, or you were sad because nobody else shared your interest. Not anymore. Because now you can actually, again, through these networks, you can say, oh, but this guy lives like maybe 1,000 kilometers away, but he likes the same kind of music, or he likes the same kind of sport, or he's also a geek like me, or he wants to do that ID. And I don't feel alone anymore, so I feel validated. I can leverage myself, and I can be happy about the choices I've made. So these new tribes are created. They are not tribes because you are living in a certain place, you met certain people. It's just the IDs. People gather around IDs or concepts. So, and it allows differentiated livings, a shared actualization. By shared actualization, it means like these groups live. They are organisms. And you get older and you keep in touch with those guys, and these groups evolve. Maybe you do something as a business, maybe not, but I mean, you have this feeling of being part of something, and these are new tribes that are being created. The same idea is with nomadism. I mean, I'm not saying that it means that everybody has to travel, but you can. I'm one of the outliers there because I keep traveling. I work from hotels most of the time, but meaning you don't need to be attached to one place. Or you can be, but still have a choice to travel a lot. You don't need to be in an office at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. And this is what people are seeing, and also people are wanting more and more. They don't, and I know that a lot of people that do startups is also because they don't want to put a suit and go at 8 a.m. On Monday. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather have jeans that fall in conferences, right? And then singularism is the same thing, is that you can be yourself. It's basically that. I know it's very, again, idealistic to say that, but you can. You can be yourself and be wherever you want on your own, be connected. This is why the nodal thing I've written there. You can do that. It's possible to live alone on an island, and I've done that for a little bit, not completely alone, but I was in a very small island. Without the internet, it was enough. You can. I'm not saying you have to, but these are stuff that even if you wanted to before, you couldn't. Now you can. And this is, again, changing the dynamics. So these new identities also mean new type of consumers. And this is where, again, I come from a corporation point of view. This is also the other thing that I don't get, is consumers are changing, and their needs and their wills and what they want is completely changed, not only because of the technology drivers before, so the networks, etc., but also because that change, it allowed consumers feel more empowered and aware of what's going on around them. So they actually, what they want from companies is extremely different. And when I say one from companies, it's also one from companies as an employee. Because what I tell to companies, I say your employees are your customers as well. Because you have together, if you want to grab those guys here that have done startups, maybe after this startup they want to work in a corporation or this corporation want to acquire them, if you want to take them in, you have to give them a value proposition that is good enough for them to actually want to stick with you. Otherwise they will just say no. They will say bye-bye, F you, and I'm going to do something else. So companies have to change with that. So it's a global, nodal, free, and democratic agora. I know democratic is not completely there, but again, these openness and transparency allows this trend of democracy. And of course, real-time data. This is one of the most potent things, and I like that the startups here, most of them are actually using data. Data is not only data about what's going on, it's like we can actually learn about ourselves, learn about your customers through actually, and this is what companies are not doing. They're still using a lot of focus groups, studies, research. I'm very happy that they paid my research, but at the end of the day, it's not real-time data. You'll see, for instance, what du jour is doing later on. They have a very, very good leverage on learning what the customer are wearing. Boost, the company, the startup that works with transportation, I also could use behavioral data to know what is the actual consumer doing. What not you actually research what he's doing, but what he's actually doing. And of course, and I know these data can also be used negatively. They can also be used, I mean, do you trust Facebook? I don't know. Do you trust Twitter? I don't know. But I mean, again, I'm talking about a trend. I'm not saying that Facebook will survive. Right now, there's still pros and cons, but we will get there. And I think 2013, again, is the year where all this is coming together. So basically, all these efforts I've just mentioned are constantly maintaining these falling prices. So they're constantly maintaining that disruption. So the agora is disruptive and on a constant basis. So the prices that have been falling down will not rise. They will not rise anymore. It's gone, and all these prices will go. Everything is being commoditized. And this is the biggest thing that companies do not, again, because they're addicted to margins, to profit margins, that they will, this is sad, but most of them will be Kodak'd, as I say, or if you want to blockbustered, if you want to use that other word. So basically, this is one of the reasons I accepted to be a mentor at Papaya Ventures, and I want to quickly tell them a shout out, is because the way the methodology they were applying, they are applying to startups is like the fact that they've chose these startups was, maybe they didn't know, but it was exactly through these mindsets. They were tapping into these global networks, these trust networks. They were obviously using, focused on mobile. They were tapping into international workforce, and I could see that in the different startups I was working with. And this is one of the reasons I really appreciated working with them, and I want to thank them for giving me the opportunity, also the opportunity to come back here for this speech. The four startups you're gonna see, each of them is using these leverages. I'm not gonna go through that because I've already talked too long, and you will see, but Boost, du jour, and USIT, all of them are actually, because I believe because of the acceleration they went through, they learned how to use each of these drivers to actually make it. I'm not sure, of course, that they're going to make it. I really hope they do, but they really, really work through these mindsets. They understand these new customers. They understand these new lifestyles that are going on. They understand that we live in a globalized world with trusted networks. And this is what I think you can give a round of applause to Papaya and each of these startups, because they're really, really, really good. So what's after next? And I'm going to finish to that, because of course there's also an after next, and I'm not a futurist. I don't think you can connect the dots forward, as Steve Jobs famously said. But I believe that it's helping the businesses to tap into these peer-to-peer networks. All these drives, as I just said, and I know I've been bashing a little bit corporations here. Corporations need startups, need people like you to actually understand what I just said. It's easy for me just to stand here on a podium and pontificate about that. But there's lots and lots and lots of untapped resources in corporations. I've worked in corporations. There's a lot of stuff that can be more efficient, processes like workflows, processes that can be much more efficient. There's a lot of disruption that can happen within corporation, within these businesses. And this is, for me, the step of this end of the year, next year. I mean, these companies, it's harder as startups, because when you're young, I was one time. When you're young, you know about consumer because it's easy, something you have in front of you all the time. But learning about enterprise is much more difficult because unless you've been in a corporation, it's harder to see where all these leverages can be applied. But I believe that if we've heard about these 1 billion companies, so I don't know, for instance, Instagram, for instance, of course, Facebook, and there's more than 1 billion. If we have 1 billion companies that value 1 billion companies in the consumer space, I think that in the enterprise space, it will be at least 100. There's so much processes to be rendered more efficient that there is really, that's for me the next thing that young startups should look after. And I'm actually very happy because I didn't know that, but these two guys here and Papaya is actually their next theme for their accelerator is mobile B2B. So they're right into that target. So I hope that they will find this type of startups. And on that, thank you very much.